many people are waiting for this to get over to get back to life, because, but I actually think life won't be the same. It's going to be a different world we get back into, in several ways. It's a different world, like you said, for the poor laborers who had hands-on jobs that somebody did manually at that point, because hands-on jobs can be very, very difficult, right? And different. Uh, the companies that will win in the long term are those who invest in robotics. So there are people who build houses by hand. At some point, you would take prefabricated things that were kind of put together somewhere and assembled somewhere else, right? Uh, so while they're going to face a huge brunt of the stress, because the things that they were told they were good for, which is working with their hands, will become less and less important, because at some point, uh, you will want to actually look at saying, look, I went through that, I don't want to go through this again. What is it I can do without having to necessarily expose myself? See, one way to look at this, and I'm not going to talk about a conspiracy theory, right? But assume, and just for the sake of argument, this is not true, and I don't believe it's true, but assume that uh, COVID-19 was a product launched by a startup in China, all right? And the world has to cope with it. Now imagine what? So it's not just a startup. So suddenly it impacts your political systems, your health systems, your economic systems, and it could well have been largely a startup, but I'm not saying it is, right? So to cope with it, you've got to literally change the way you live. So there is an extraordinary scope for disruption out here in terms of somebody doing this. So you talked about AI and the power of artificial intelligence. And that's a small piece. I mean, look at this, a simple thing, a disease that actually is less virulent than malaria has shut down the world, all right? So at the one end, the people who will suffer are the hands-on workers, the laborers, the maids, the gardeners, and so on and so forth. The contrary to that is there are people who will build large numbers of automated systems to be able to go past that. But let's talk about people in the service economy, because we think we might be, certainly we are better off than the hands-on laborers who are not trained, who don't know how to, cope with the new normal. But there's a lot more coping that, people that we know, people like us have to do, people like, people in the startup business have to do. And that coping is around a very simple fact. So I've been spending a little time on phone calls with potential candidates for some of my investee companies. Now the interesting thing is, Eddie, I don't even know where you're based. I mean, you're here at the other end of my screen. I don't know where you live, but I've been talking to candidates who are in Europe, who are in actually South America, Central America, India, Nepal, etc., Singapore. And it doesn't matter. You're at the other end of the screen. So suddenly you sit back and say, hey, if I'm hiring people, now I could be in an advertising agency I founded in India. I could be a data processing firm in Prague. I could be whoever, anywhere, right? Why do I have to necessarily need somebody who's here? If you figure out over the last 2, 3, 4 weeks, and how much longer this is going to last, that you can actually work pretty okay with people somewhere around the world. Suddenly, the way you hire is going to be different. The place you hire is going to be different. For those people are now look at it on the converse side. If you're looking to find a job, you're looking to get top dollar for this, let's say this recording, etc. Why do you necessarily need an Indian sponsor, right? Where is your market? So essentially, what we've suddenly done is we've dislocated your location, and if everything was if the earlier real estate mantra was location, 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 probably the new mantra is dislocation, 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 because you've actually broken things out by saying you don't need to have an office there in one place, you don't need to have the customers around your office, etc. So you spread, you suddenly say, okay, fine, I have a global reach, I can sell to customers anywhere, I can hire people anywhere, and so literally, we are now the companies I've invested in are doing business around the world by having people that we've never actually met in person who are doing stuff, and we get on a call like this once a day to get stuff done. So this is an extraordinary change. So this actually means in some ways that there's a lot more threat. If a client, if a customer in the US, say, wants to buy a satellite or wants to hire an advertising firm or whatever, why would he necessarily choose one down the road? Because he's not going to meet them. He's going to meet them on a call like this. And maybe he's going to meet them once in a quarter, and you can get on a plane once in a quarter, right? So the people in the high, in the US, for example, in the advertising business, a firm will not work for $25,000, $30,000 a month in retainer. Well, you can get great Indian companies who will work at a third the price or half the price in the US. So there's a huge potential here for companies in India, in Vietnam, in the Philippines, and China, etc., to be able to suddenly service first world needs, right? So there's going to be a flattening of this. Well, if you live in San Francisco, you've got to charge top dollar things. So I think we're going to see some significant changes in the services business, in the manufacturing business, and each of these is going to be driven by other tools. So suddenly, you've heard from the guy who runs Zoom, who says, well, in October I was doing 10 million calls a day, now I'm doing 200 million calls a day. 20x in 5 months, right? Who'd have thunk it, right? So I think you're going to see extraordinary changes out here, and COVID is just one way. And the way to deal with this is just not going to be business. You might need to change the way your politics works. You need to might change the way your government works. If this was a startup, if hypothetically COVID was a product of a startup, you will now have to, how do you counter that? You don't put back a disease and kill others. Right? So essentially now the way business and government and society have to really work much closer together than they ever did before. If at one point in India, some business stays away from government, let them do what they want, I'll do what I want. Now suddenly you've got to work together. There's this crazy amount of cooperation, and I believe that in this entire race between, is a socialist kind of mindset going to work or a capitalist kind of mindset supposed to work? I think I've been swinging. When I was young, I was a hard out Ayn Rand capitalist, and I've kind of swung a little more to the center, and I now believe that it's a social responsibility of business and of, so everybody is linked together in a way that business is now part of society and part of government, and government is part of business and part of society. I mean, so if hospitals in the United States want hydroxychloroquine, HCQS, right, which the doctor you named suddenly said is a miracle cure, which by the way it's not. So because I have friends in the US who kind of figured it's not a miracle cure, right? But Trump believes any nonsense, so he figured that the supply was shut down. So the hospitals figured the supply was shut down. So what did they do? They went to Trump, who called Modi, and who lifted a ban. So suddenly, guess what? Within a day, the business makes a call to the government makes a call to the government, the government makes a call to business here, and boom, trade happens. So this never used to happen before. The ability for this way of business, government, and society to work closely together never was there. I think we're going to see a sea change in what happens out here. Businesses will need to be a lot more socially responsible. Again, strangely, that Facebook was really slammed long before this, but now it's been in some way, they've kind of redeemed themselves by just being the mode of conversation for like a billion people out there. Even though I still think they suck as a company, right? And I don't own any Facebook stock, and but at this point, suddenly people are figuring out that just like every business has corporate social responsibility, government has business social responsibility, and citizens have responsibility to both. So all these three elements are going to intertwine much more closely together.